This is Podco Media Networks.
It's the Innovation Podcast with Mark Reed Edwards and Garnet Harriman. Let's start the show.
Hey, Garnet, how are you doing?
Great. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. We have food on our minds these days in the iPod. We had Tyler Lorenzen on a few weeks ago talking about Purist Protein. We'll talk with Tom Williams of Tommy's Superfoods soon. And today we're talking with Jonathan Webb of AppHarvest, which is on the cutting edge of growing non-GMO food using less water than traditional farming. The company is creating sustainable farming, building a homegrown food supply, improving access to nutritious food, and maybe best of all, it's investing in Appalachia and creating jobs. Plus, just read that AppHarvest recently announced the world's largest LED lighting installation. How's that for an introduction, Jonathan? Welcome.
It's great. Thank you for having me, and appreciate the opportunity to discuss our efforts taking place here in Central Appalachia.
So, Jonathan, can you share your background and the origin story of AppHarvest?
Yeah, sure. So my background, I grew up in Kentucky and went to the University of Kentucky, and we are second, third largest coal producing state with West Virginia. And the eastern part of our state has been heavily dependent on that industry for decades. When I got out of undergrad at the University of Kentucky around 2008, we all know the global financial crisis. People impacted all over the world, but our region had not only that to deal with, but we had the decline of the coal industry on top of that. So out of undergrad, I had an opportunity to go into coal sales and did not do that. I ended up moving to New York and pursued a career in wind and solar development. Wanted to be in the energy world, but wanted to be a part of building large-scale sustainable projects, and that took me up there. With that, and kind of the 10 years prior to AppHarvest, was in New York and D.C. and a part of building large-scale sustainable energy projects, solar and wind, and saw the dichotomy and the pull between what was taking place in the eastern part of our state, which was the decline of the coal industry, while we saw sustainable development around the world and around the U.S. take off. And so for me, a fundamental part of AppHarvest was, how do we access capital at scale? How do we tap into some of the brightest and most brilliant minds in that sustainable world and reimagine and rebuild in Central Appalachia? So, I've tried to say that, controlled environment agriculture today is really what wind and solar was about 10 to 15 years ago, where the cost to build has come down, your efficiency has gone up, where you get, more production for a lower cost, and you can compete with conventional. So very similar to what we saw with the disruption that took place in energy, 10 to 15 years ago, where wind and solar technologies were deployed all around the U.S. and all around the world. And now we're seeing, in agriculture, a point where we have a real opportunity to reshape agriculture in the U.S. So for us, a critical piece to this is place. And being in eastern Kentucky, where we've seen serious disruption, nearly 50,000 jobs lost in Central Appalachia due to the decline of coal, how do we harness that ingenuity and tenacity and refocus on another industry? And that's where we've really committed to not only build large-scale indoor grow facilities in the region, but to develop an entire ag tech ecosystem that can support the industry. So we're well underway right now in Moorhead, Kentucky, where we're building one of the largest indoor grow facilities, 60 acres under glass, where we'll use 90% less water than open field agriculture, non-GMO seeds, no chemical pesticides, and very, very happy about how we've designed this, and more importantly, the folks here in the region that are committing to run the facility with us are the reason why we're here.
And what are the crops that you're growing?
We're focusing on tomatoes, and part of the reason for that is, being in D.C. before founding AppHarvest, I was supporting a White House initiative under the last administration that was building large-scale energy projects on Army land. And it was about a part of building 750 acres of solar down in Georgia. During that time, looking at kind of different markets, being in D.C., something that caught my eye was produce imports from south of our border to the U.S. have nearly tripled the last 10 to 15 years. And there were 4 billion pounds of tomatoes imported from Mexico alone last year. It doesn't really matter your geopolitical stance on imports, but it does not make sense for us to be trucking vegetables 5 days on a semi-truck to the eastern seaboard. So we're focusing on tomatoes because they're the number one import from Mexico with 4 billion pounds. And we want to bring that production to our region. And why Kentucky, beyond just loving the place that I'm from, we can get to about 70% of the U.S. population in a one-day drive from Kentucky. So Jeff Bezos was here about 2 months ago with our governor, where they were announcing their $1.5 billion prime shipping hub that's being built in northern Kentucky. UPS has their global air hub, global port shipping hub in Louisville, Kentucky. DHL's here. It's a logistics center that can get to New York, D.C., Detroit, down to Atlanta, Chicago, St. Louis, over to D.C., back again within that day drive. So for us, it's taking production that's being grown in the southwest of the U.S. and in Mexico, pulling that production over to our region, reducing trucking from 5 days down to 1 day, and as a result, reducing our diesel consumption by about 80%. So again, focusing on tomatoes and bringing that production home to the U.S. and more regionalized.
So what's the productivity per acre? How many pounds of tomatoes can you grow per acre?
Well, it depends on the system and the technology that's infused, but typically with this glass structure, and the reason there's been a lot of somewhat new attention in agriculture and ag tech, and some different people are attacking it from different ways. It's a big problem, and we needed a lot of different approaches. But for us, we elected a glass facility because we see it as we want to use technology and align with nature and use the natural systems as best as possible. So the glass allows us to capture the sunlight. And for us, this will be the only facility of this size to where we're capturing the rainwater and running the facility completely on recycled rainwater. But with that and with the yield per acre, 20, 30, 40 times more per acre than open field agriculture. And so adding the software, the sensors, the artificial lighting on top of what nature is already providing us, which is that natural sunlight and rainwater. And again, boosting that yield per acre is very important. I'll be speaking at E.O. Wilson's Half Earth Summit. It's in Berkeley. And what Half Earth is working to what they're proposing is by 2050, we have preserved half the world's land and water for biodiversity and natural habitat. All the while, there's a paradox of what our world is facing, and that is the UN report that recently came out has said by 2050, the world will need nearly 50 to 70% more food, which would require nearly 2 planet Earths to have enough land and fresh water to feed our planet based on our current growing. So using indoor agriculture is a way to preserve acreage, use far less water, use far less land is critical. And again, there's a lot of different people looking at it on whether they're growing in urban areas and in cities. We're taking the regional rural approach, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. But again, getting yield up per acre and using less resources is something that is critical for not only the U.S., but all around the world.
And how has it been received? Maybe there are some headwinds, here in the U.S. with ideas like this these days, but how has it been received in coal country and beyond?
Well, it looks like they have 82 million supporters.
Yeah. We're up to that point. So it's actually, we're investing about $100 million all cash into what is the third poorest district in the U.S. So for us, it's very important where this project is placed and how it's received in the region is really fundamentally why this is happening. And the support there, I don't think a project of this size and the scale of which we're operating at does not happen as quickly and aggressively as what we've been able to pull together. And that has been because of every community stakeholder, working with the governor's office, working with any policymaker and on the permitting side, that we pulled this together in really record speed. I mean, I think we broke national records on the ability to pull together the permits for this project. And so how is it received in this region? Now, this is a region that we do feel like we powered the country through coal. About 70% of U.S. power came from coal at one point. We're down to 30%. So it's a region that powered the country that now is preparing and mobilizing to feed the U.S., and we're taking a lot of pride in that. But the one aspect is this is a region from the outside that has been banged up and due to the decline of coal. And now there's a sense of pride and really wanting to lead an agriculture revolution in America and be at the forefront on deploying cutting edge technologies. So, for us, going on that job site, meeting with construction workers who are going home and, talking to their families about how they're leading an agriculture revolution here in our country, it's been very important and extremely well received. And the only reason really why AppHarvest is possible is because of the community support here on the ground.
I am very curious about the types of jobs that are being created. I'd like to talk about it in as much detail as you're comfortable talking about it, just the types of jobs and typical job titles, responsibilities, that sort of stuff. Yep.
No, definitely. Good question. And so, part of this is as technology is infused across industries, we're going to see industries all reshaped, right? And so, whether it be AI, robotics, all the different tools that continue to hit the market are going to disrupt every industry. So with agriculture, it's not going to be any different. And we're going to see a rapid acceleration over the next couple of years. With that, we feel like food production, and I've had conversations with many other people. I think, one of my conversations with Kimball Musk, who's involved with Square Roots in Brooklyn, pretty eye to eye on this, which is our take at AppHarvest. We feel like people should always be at the center of fruit, vegetable, agriculture production, food production as best as possible. Providing technology tools, in order for them to be more efficient, operate more effectively, but really allowing our team to be the one that is using the technology and not the other way around, where we're not the ones in second, we're the ones in first and using the technology. So with that, there's a lot of different, we have about 285, almost 300 people that are going to be required to operate this facility. From the top end standpoint, our head growers make a doctor's salary. From the entry level standpoint to the entry level worker in this greenhouse, we've modeled it very similar, frankly, and we're looking at UPS, who has 29,000 employees in Louisville, Kentucky. We're looking at what they're doing, which is minimum wage in our greenhouse will be $13 an hour. This is for an entry-level employee, full health benefits, which gets them up to about 17. And then we're offering classes in the nights and weekends at local community colleges and robotics schools to try to upskill them so that they can come along with our growth, knowing that technology, as we infuse it in the facility, whether it be robotics or AI that's detecting potential diseases, that again, our entry-level employees, we see them potentially as being at the forefront of this industry as much as anybody else. So there's a wide gap between what our head grower, what our operators, what our engineers are doing on one end and what the entry-level folks are doing. But we think, providing a living wage and the way we've been able to model this out and find a way to actually build a profitable project, the only way we're going to continue to attract capital and build the way we want to do in the region is to make this work from a private standpoint. But it's frankly just the 5 days of transportation down to a day drive is what makes it so attractive for our region, that we save 4 days, not only on the fuel and logistics, but also additional shelf life.
Right.
We anticipate, right now there's about 40% of fresh fruits and vegetables end up in a landfill. That's because about 20% at the grocery ends up as waste and about another 20% by the time you get it home. We're anticipating less than 5% food waste. So not only are we having cost savings on logistics, we have extended shelf life that'll go to the grocer. All that is able to work in our model to where we can pay a living wage and really try to redefine what we look at as agriculture here in the U.S. is something that, frankly, you ask, what we're doing. I would encourage folks to look at growing practices, not just around this country, but out of this country where, south of our border, they're paying, minimum wage was raised to $5 a day. That to me is just flatly unacceptable. And so, that's our competition on the other end of this, which is, we try to, and we've been saying consumers have the ability to vote with their dollar every day on what they buy and what they consume. And we're hopeful that, if we are cost competitive and we are not planning to raise prices for everyday Americans on what they're paying for tomatoes at Walmart or Costco or Kroger. We're hopeful that folks will vote with their dollar and elect to buy AppHarvest produce and support what's happening in our communities, knowing that we've got an effort here that is very community focused and that we're doing our best to try to stand up a facility that we can all be proud of. And also, kind of looking at agriculture from the outside and coming in, I've been in some meetings with presidents and CEOs of large agriculture companies now. It's a house of cards. And I think they're a bit terrified on how disastrous our food system is in a sense to, I heard in one meeting a CEO say, if blockchain was introduced into our industry today, we would be restructuring or bankrupt in a year or two. If consumers actually knew what was happening to their food from point A to by the time consumption, they wouldn't buy it. They wouldn't purchase it. And so part of our take is setting up a facility that we can be proud of and also be fully transparent, let the consumers know exactly the way in which we're operating. And over time, we think, as agriculture progresses, a lot of those incumbents are going to have a lot of trouble trying to hold on to market share as consumers see more and more into what is taking place, how the food is prepared, how folks are treated. And so for us, it's very important it's going to be hard work, and it's nothing about it's easy. But for us, I think that one of the exciting aspects is being able to build a large scale facility from the ground up that not only has, the sustainability metrics and the environmental metrics that we've been focusing on, but also something that, for the long term, where we have a facility where we're treating our employees with a certain level of dignity that we think should be required in agriculture.
Quick follow on, because the jobs thing is, to me anyway, liking to take the sort of macro view on how things are related and just trying to anticipate how those relationships can affect outcomes. I would bet that there is a positive symbiosis between what you're doing and the community college movements, such as it's playing out in Kentucky. The wave of innovation and expansion in community colleges around the country. Is Kentucky a free community college state or not yet?
So not yet, but we're working with high schools. We've made nearly $150,000 investment at Shelby Valley High School in Eastern Kentucky, where we've infused technology. We're going to continue to make investments at high schools, community colleges. We're doing our part to try to be as open source on the information as possible. We think, again, the problems in agriculture are so vast that we just need to simply get information out. We don't have a workforce in the U.S. that can operate these facilities at scale. We just do not have it. So what you said there on community colleges, you're absolutely right. We're looking to target not only community colleges, but all 5 of the major universities in the eastern part of our state. Eastern Kentucky University, Morehead State, Berea College, University of Kentucky, University of Pikeville. And for us, we're providing access to our facility. We're in the midst of working on all this with the universities where they can come in, review our data, look at our growing practices, do their own research. And part of this is, if we want to see this industry take off at scale, we need people who know how to operate at scale. And we don't have that. And the country we've been really modeling this off of, and I got back 2 days ago, is the Netherlands. So a country that's a third the size of Kentucky in landmass. We could fit the entire country of the Netherlands into Eastern Kentucky. They have the second most agricultural exports in the world, only behind the U.S. They're growing with incredible efficiency. When we talk about controlled environment agriculture in America, that's the country we need to be looking for. I admire what's going on in Boston, what's going on in San Francisco, some great ag tech companies in New York City, but the world leader is in Holland. For us, we're just trying to unlock the solutions that are there and bring them over to our region. And in working with universities, working with community colleges, working with high schools is a critical piece in this. I think there was an article I read that came out yesterday that keep hammered on this, but the average age of the farmer in America is in roughly their mid-60s. No farms, no food. I've spoken with the CEO of American Farmland Trust several times. Many of us are looking at this and we're deeply concerned. You go to a high school in the U.S. and you ask anybody, what do you want to do after high school? Maybe they want to be a doctor, a lawyer. Maybe they want to be in a tech job in San Francisco. You have virtually no one that says, I want to be in agriculture, I want to farm. that is a fundamental problem in our country right now. And so for us, infusing technology early on into classrooms, getting people excited and having them be a part of the process of how do we do this better is a critical part for our effort is again, working with those educational institutions to see how do we garner some excitement around building a new food system. So those investments for us have been important, and we've been talking with our Commissioner of Education in the state and all the local institutions to try to keep the momentum going here collectively.
All right, on the next episode, we learn about the technology that AppHarvest puts to work, how they turn to experts in the Netherlands, how AppHarvest is responding to the challenge presented to the earth 30 years in the future. And Jonathan says there needs to be urgency around our food. That's all next time.
Thanks for joining Garnet and Mark on the Innovation Podcast. Visit theinnovationpodcast.co to subscribe and listen to other episodes.